At 82 years old, Joe Pesci has finally stepped forward with a truth that Hollywood never expected him to admit. For decades, he was the explosive force of American cinema, the man who could dominate a screen with a single glare, a single line, a single moment. He was the sharp-tongued legend of Goodfellas, the unpredictable genius of Raging Bull, the surprise comedic master of Home Alone. But behind all the fame, the awards, the unforgettable scenes, something else was happening. Something Joe kept buried. And now, at 82, he's revealing it. People close to Pesci say they always knew he carried pain quietly, privately, the way only a man from his generation can. But no one imagined the depth of it. No one imagined that the real reason he vanished from Hollywood for years had nothing to do with roles or directors or so-called retirement. It was far more personal and far more heartbreaking. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Joe has opened up about the struggles he fought alone, the losses he endured in silence, and the emotional wound that changed him forever. Fans who adored him on screen never saw the battles behind the scenes, battles that shaped his decisions, his career, and the reclusive life he lives today. This isn't the Joe Pesci the world thinks it knows. This is the Joe Pesci he never wanted anyone to see. What he just revealed has left Hollywood stunned, and those who knew him best say this is the first time he has ever spoken so honestly about the truth he kept hidden for decades. Stay with me, because once you hear what Joe Pesci finally confessed at 82, you may never look at him the same way again. Joe Pesci's name is synonymous with intensity. From the streets of Goodfellas to the casinos of Las Vegas and Casino, he created characters so unforgettable that millions memorized their lines and feared their presence. But behind the tough exterior, behind the bravado and explosive performances, was a man who never really wanted the world to see him, even at the height of his career. Pesci was different from other Hollywood stars. While others thrived on red carpets, interviews, and fame, he preferred quiet. He wanted music, family, and peace, a life away from the relentless gaze of the public. Friends have often described him as fiercely private, a man whose humor and warmth only appeared around people he trusted. Yet Hollywood demanded more. His talent was undeniable, magnetic, and unforgettable. Directors didn't just want him in a film, they needed him. And Pesci delivered. He could vanish into any role, embodying rage, fear, or comedy with astonishing authenticity. But living in those intense roles came at a cost. Each performance required a level of emotional commitment few could sustain. The characters were heavy, they demanded pieces of Pesci himself, pieces he never fully recovered. By the mid-90s, after films like Casino, Pesci had had enough. He retired not because he lacked talent or passion, but because he needed to reclaim his life. He wanted to step away from the world that expected fire, intensity, and perfection. He craved quiet, solitude, and a return to the simple joys of life he had missed while living in the glare of fame. Pesci's absence from Hollywood left fans puzzled and concerned. Rarely did he appear in interviews, photos, or public events. He wasn't avoiding his fans maliciously. He was protecting himself. He had given everything to his craft, and in return, he needed time to heal, reflect, and live life on his terms. Even as he aged, Pesci didn't slow down in spirit. He spent time with family, indulged in music, and occasionally connected with close friends. But the world began to notice subtle changes. The intensity in his eyes softened, his movements slowed, and the once explosive energy seemed to retreat. At 82, Joe Pesci is no longer just a Hollywood legend. He is a man who carried decades of expectations, roles, and emotional weight and is now finally revealing the human side of the icon. The story that follows isn't about scandal. It isn't about drama. It's about the truth, the quiet, emotional, and deeply human reality behind the man we all thought we knew. After stepping away from Hollywood, Joe Pesci settled into a life that few could imagine for someone of his stature. The man who had dominated screens with ferocity now sought something very different: peace. He wasn't interested in awards, red carpets, or public adoration. He wanted time, a chance to exist without the glare of cameras and the weight of expectation. But even in retirement, the past never truly lets go. Pesci carried with him the emotional toll of decades spent living inside extreme characters. Characters who demanded rage, cunning, and tension. Characters who left emotional marks, the kind that don't fade when the scene ends or the credits roll. He had given so much of himself to the craft that stepping back required as much courage as stepping onto a set. Friends say that for years, Pesci lived quietly, but never lightly. He immersed himself in music, a lifelong love that allowed him to express what words could not. He spent time with family and a very small circle of friends he trusted implicitly. But he also confronted solitude, the kind that comes when you're a legend, but have few people who truly see you. And in those moments, the weight of fame, memory, and sacrifice became impossible to ignore. As his body and energy naturally slowed with age, the contrast between the man audiences remembered and the man living quietly became clear. Photos that surfaced of him in his late 70s and early 80s startled fans, showing a softer, quieter Pesci. His movements were slower, his voice gentler, and his once fiery intensity tempered by time. It was a reminder that behind every cinematic explosion, behind every unforgettable line, was a human being navigating the fragility of life. Yet the emotional burden was heavier than the physical changes. Pesci often reflected on the choices that brought him fame, the roles, the work, the intensity, and the cost they exacted. He recognized that while he achieved legendary status, he also forfeited decades of normalcy, private moments, and uninterrupted peace. In interviews, he alluded to this without fully detailing it, allowing a glimpse of the sacrifices he made to preserve the very essence of who he is. At 82, Pesci's story is a lesson in balance, a reminder that the world often sees only the final performance, not the hours of struggle, reflection, and quiet endurance behind it. It is a story of a man reclaiming his life, on his own terms, in a way that few could understand, and even fewer could appreciate. The next chapter reveals the emotional truths that surfaced during his brief return to Hollywood, the comeback that showed the world exactly what he had endured, and the cost of stepping back into the life he had tried so hard to leave behind. Even after years of retirement, the world was never fully done with Joe Pesci. Hollywood legends rarely disappear completely, and when Martin Scorsese approached him for The Irishman, everything Pesci had worked to protect came rushing back. Pesci initially refused, not because he lacked passion, talent, or respect for the project, but because he knew what it would cost him emotionally. Returning to the intense, demanding world of filmmaking meant stepping back into characters that were heavy, exhausting, and in some ways, consuming. The explosive energy that once defined him would need to be rekindled, and the emotional toll could be profound. Friends close to him reveal that Pesci said no over and over again more than 50 times before finally agreeing. It wasn't about ego or fame. It wasn't about money. It was loyalty to Scorsese, to De Niro, to the art form he had mastered. It was about honoring relationships and the craft he loved, despite knowing it would take a lot from him. Filming The Irishman showed a very different Pesci from the one audiences remembered. The intensity was still there, but softer, more measured. He moved with care, spoke with precision, and carried an awareness of age and experience that added depth to his performance. The fiery, unpredictable energy of Tommy DeVito was replaced by a nuanced, restrained brilliance. Behind the scenes, Pesci's moments of reflection were visible. He often sat quietly between takes, contemplating not just the scene, but the years of his life that led him there, the decades of performing, sacrificing, and retreating from the spotlight. Colleagues noticed a gentleness, a vulnerability rarely seen in the man who had once dominated screens with explosive energy. When The Irishman was released, fans were stunned not by Pesci's talent, which was still extraordinary, but by the human reality it revealed. The man who had been seemingly indestructible on screen was human after all. The physical slowing, the softening of features, and the emotional weight visible in his presence reminded audiences that even legends age, and even the strongest spirits can feel the toll of time. After filming, Pesci withdrew once again. This time, there was no expectation of another comeback. He returned to the life he values most: music, family, quiet reflection, and the small circle of people he trusts. It's a life he chooses intentionally, a life that prioritizes peace over public attention, authenticity over performance. At 82, Joe Pesci's story is no longer just about unforgettable roles. It's about a man navigating the cost of fame, the sacrifices behind brilliance, and the quiet, emotional resilience required to live fully, privately, and honestly. The final chapter reveals the most poignant truth of all: what Pesci learned about himself, life, and the balance between public legend and private peace. At 82, Joe Pesci is no longer just a Hollywood icon. He is a man reflecting on a life filled with brilliance, intensity, and sacrifice. For decades, audiences knew him as Tommy DeVito, Nicky Santoro, or the irascible Uncle Frank, but few saw the man behind the roles: the private, thoughtful, and deeply human Joe Pesci. Pesci's story is not one of scandal or misfortune. It's the story of someone who gave everything to his craft, and in doing so, learned what it truly costs to live in the public eye while protecting your soul. Those who have spent time with him recently describe a man who is peaceful, yet deeply reflective. He has slowed down physically, and his fiery energy has softened, but what remains is a clarity that comes only with age. Pesci understands, more than ever, the balance between ambition and well-being, performance and privacy. He recognizes the sacrifices he made for fame, the relationships that strained under the weight of public attention, and the moments he missed because the world demanded more from him than he could freely give. Yet in that reflection lies something beautiful. Pesci has learned to value the quiet joys he once overlooked: music, laughter with family, solitude without judgment, and the freedom to live life according to his own rules. These are victories that Hollywood cannot award, yet they carry a depth that even his most iconic roles never could. Pesci has also embraced vulnerability in ways he never did during the peak of his career. He shares memories, expresses gratitude, and acknowledges the challenges he faced, not to seek sympathy, but to leave a legacy that extends beyond the screen. His honesty reminds fans that the human cost behind art is often invisible, and that even those who seem invincible experience moments of fragility. At 82, Joe Pesci stands as a testament to resilience, authenticity, and the quiet dignity of a life lived on one's own terms. His journey reminds the world that fame and talent are not measures of happiness, and that the greatest victories are often the personal ones: finding peace, cherishing loved ones, and living honestly. The legend may always be remembered for the unforgettable characters he portrayed, but the man behind them, thoughtful, private, and profoundly human, is finally seen in full, and in that humanity, the story of Joe Pesci at 82 leaves an indelible impression. Brilliance doesn't always look loud, and strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply endures and quietly shines.